Okay, good morning everybody. It's Mike and thanks for jumping on here with me this morning. You know, this past week I've just received too many calls from too many agents trying to save a deal. They're in trouble and they want some advice on how to save the deal. And many times, most times, it's been the sellers decided they don't want to sell, the buyers decided they don't want to buy, closings tomorrow, what can I do, what can I say, how do we handle this? And I think this is a big problem. You know, in golf they have a saying that all bets are won and lost on the first tee box. And I think that's true, and I think it's true in real estate as well. I think that if your closing is tomorrow and one of the parties just has changed their mind and doesn't want to go forward, what can you do or say to keep them to the deal? And I think the bet's already been lost. Deals are saved before you ever write the contract. And all this week, today through Thursday, each day I'm going to give you a tip on how to save the deal before you ever write the contract. Okay? So today's focus will just be on earnest money. But I've got more tips coming for you, so be sure to dial in each morning this week and let's see if we can save some deals for you. Earnest money. You know, the point to earnest money is to show earnest, for the buyer to show earnest and desire and have some type of monetary way of keeping their promise. But it doesn't always apply just to the buyer. And you know, over time I've watched the average amount of earnest money deposits gradually increase. And the reason they increase is because we're trying to find a pain threshold. This is the point of earnest money. The pain threshold. What's the point where the buyer, well, we're going to speak about buyer in a second, I'm going to talk to you about seller in just a minute. What's the point, the earnest money deposit, that the buyer won't walk away from? What is that number? And I don't think we just had a situation on Friday where one of our agents was losing a deal. Their buyer just changed their mind and didn't want to close. And I said, well, how much earnest money do you have? And they said $5,000. And the buyer said they're willing to walk away from it. And I thought, wow, okay. So for that buyer, $5,000 wasn't enough earnest money. Other people, $5,000 would be plenty. I think when you're working with the home buyer, from the listing agent's point of view, you're the listing agent, you have an offer. You want enough earnest money to keep that buyer's attention when they're having an emotional drama. When they're having second thoughts, when they're having cold feet, it's enough deposit that they won't lose it. That's what you're trying. You've got to get them through this emotional period, and that deposit has to be large enough to where in their brain they go, well, I'm feeling this way, but I can't lose that much money. You've got to get to that number. Now, different factors influence that. The price range of the house, the type of financing, how much money down, what seems to be a painful number in that situation. Listing agents, if you don't get that much, I contend you're not doing your job. We had a large hedge fund recently back out of over $6 million worth of earnest money deposits. And you know what the guy said to me? He laughed about it. He said, Mike, makes you wonder why listing agents aren't getting more earnest money from Wall Street hedge funds. They're getting $2,000 and $3,000 from us. We spend that at lunch every day. All right. If you've got a large investment group purchasing one of your listings, why are you getting $2,000 or $3,000 from them? This guy said to me, you know what deals we're not defaulting on, Mike? Where there's $25,000, $30,000 in earnest money. Now I think that's a learning moment. Listing agents, you have a large fund buying one of your listings, a corporate entity. $5,000 isn't moving the needle for them. They'll walk away from that deal when their business plan changes. And they don't care. They don't have a heart. They don't have a soul. They won't try to do the right thing. Everything's a math equation to them. So in that situation, $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 earnest money would be what's needed to keep them to the deal. Joe and Sally buying their first home, maybe it's not that much. Maybe $5,000 to $10,000 is enough for them. My point being, you've got to find the pain threshold, listing agents, so that buyer doesn't walk away from your contract just because they're having cold feet. Now, agents working with the buyer, you've got to understand this too. Your home buyer is going to go through a period where they have buyer's remorse, where they're going to have some cold feet. And they need to have enough earnest money up front to get them through that period. We're having second thoughts, but we can't afford to lose that deposit. And I contend you're doing a good job working with the buyer if you got enough earnest money up front to help them through that period of emotionality. And if you don't be surprised when people say, well, we've got $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 earnest money. We've changed our mind. We're having second thoughts. We're having cold feet, and we are willing to lose that money. That's not that much money to us. We're willing to lose it. You didn't get enough up front. All bets are won and lost before the contract's ever written. So the next time you have a deal that's about to fall apart, one of the parties doesn't want to close per the terms of their contract. They don't have a contractual reason for getting out of the deal. They just don't want it anymore. I think the question is, what could I have done differently to prevent this from happening? Not what can I do differently. At that point, there's probably nothing you can do. It should have been done before the offer was ever written. How do you keep sellers to a deal when they change their mind? Well, if a buyer has to put up some kind of deposit, why doesn't the seller? Well, I know what the answer to that is, because Mike, we never do it that way. Yeah, but why don't we do it that way? If the home buyer has to put up, I'm just going to use round numbers right now, and I'm going to say something that may be a little crazy sounding to you. But I'm watching too many sellers just say, oh, we'll just tell them we've decided not to sell the house. We're not going to show up to closing. And really, what's the practical application anybody's going to do about it? That buyer's going to sue that seller? I know everybody threatens that and postures with it, but come on. Is it really a practicality? Is that really going to happen? So that you can show up in court 3 to 4 years from now to settle today's dispute? And by the way, did anybody end up getting a house out of this? No. No. What if this? What if you're working with the home buyer and you want to protect them? Why don't you ask the seller to put up some money too? Hey, if either party backs out of this deal without valid cause, they lose the $10,000 they put up. Why is it just the buyer side putting it up? An agent's working with the buyer. I know we all want to believe that we're a good agent, right? Well, are we? Are we actually looking out for the best interest of our customer? Are we? Are we predicting potential outcomes that they can't imagine yet? Because I think most people are naive enough to believe that, well, we have a contract and people have to honor the contract. Well, what happens when they don't? What are you going to do about it? I think both sides need to put up some money. And if either side backs out of this deal for no valid reason, the other side gets all the money. Seems to me that would get a lot of people through some cold feet. Seems to me that might help keep more of our deals together and allow you to close more homes in less time. Stick with me this week. We're going to continue to explore other reasons why deals fall apart and what you might be able to do. And I'm going to challenge you to some of our conventional business as usual thinking. Might feel uncomfortable at first, but like in today's example, I just want to leave you with this. Why can't we do that? Why can't we require the seller to put up some deposit money too? What's the problem with that? If it's good enough for the buyer, it's not good enough for the seller. And let's get those deposits up so that there's some pain threshold going on there. And that, my friends, is how we're going to go out and we're going to make it happen for ourselves today.